Thank you, Shoei, for the very nice introduction. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Boon. Welcome to EdXP. This is one of our very first seminars, Experience the Power in Learning. So I'll be covering the internal assessment for mathematics today, how to excel in your mathematics internal assessment. So this is quite a casual seminar that I'm going to do. I have a few slides. I tried to compile as much information as I could actually until last night. So I hope that this will be useful for everyone listening in. Feel free to ask me any questions after the session. Feel free to also take screenshots if you find it useful. Okay, so I'll just start because we have quite a lot to go through. Feel free to pause or raise your hands or type in the chat if you have any questions during the seminar. This is the scope of my presentation. I will start with the introduction to the mathematics exploration, also known as the internal assessment for mathematics. And something quite rare, I'll talk about the 10 responsibilities set by IB for the teacher. Okay, a lot of times we ask what are the student requirements, but it's also good to know what expectations should we expect from the teacher. I'll also be going through the assessment rubric. How can we approach the internal assessment if you are in your first year or second year of your IB, or you have not embarked on your IB? I'll share a little bit of how you can actually begin crafting your IA. Yeah. And I'll go into something interesting. How do we pair potential research questions and mathematical topics? I'll show you guys some of the good internal assessment samples from my students and from free resources. Okay, and then I'll move on to some of the frequently asked questions by IB students. And also, in the last day, I'll cover a question and answer segment. Okay, so I'll jump right in. For those who don't know what the mathematical exploration is, the main purpose is for students to demonstrate their skills and knowledge and to pursue their personal interests without any time limitations or constraints that are associated with written examinations. So this is a piece of coursework typically done at the end of the first year of IB, and it lasts all the way to the middle of the second year, right? Both, whether you're taking SL or HL, AA or AI, you will need to do this piece of internal assessment. There's no escaping. And what you're trying to do is to investigate a piece of written work in the area of mathematics. Okay, and you're not alone in this. Many schools actually start off by having brainstorming sessions, teamwork and collaboration activities for students and the teacher in class to generate ideas. Okay, potentially select a topic for your exploration. Okay, it's okay for students to share resources. Okay, and seek peer feedback from your friends. Okay, time allocation is a big thing. Officially, IB states that it's about 10 to 15 hours, but I personally know that a lot of students spend a lot more time than that. Okay, so that's just a recommendation. The IA itself should be about 10 to 20 pages long. Okay, and there are some formatting requirements like double line spacing, include your diagrams and graphs. Okay, but the 12 to 20 pages requirements does not include the bibliography, all your data sets that you will put that are too lengthy. You can put it at the end, at the bibliography section. Yeah. What should be stated on the cover page? Clearly the title, number of pages, okay, and also the references that are not assessed. It is important to take note of that. Okay, let's move on to the 10 responsibilities of the teacher. During the process, the idea is that students are not left alone here. Okay, the teacher is supposed to advise students to choose an appropriate topic for their exploration. Okay, to provide opportunities for students to learn the skills related to exploration work. Okay, it is also the teacher's responsibility to make sure that students understand the assessment criteria, which I will be sharing later. Yeah. They also want to encourage and support students throughout the IA. Okay, and provide regular formal and informal feedback. At the end of the IA, okay, the teacher actually needs to verify your calculations. Okay, the IA is fully internally marked, but it may be moderated by IB. Okay, depending on spot checks done by the IBO. Okay, the teacher also needs to assess the work accurately based on the handbook of procedures from the DP program. Okay, and the teacher also needs to fully understand the strengths and weaknesses of each student's exploration. So this is the assessment rubric. For those who take Math IB, you will know that there's a paper 1, and paper 2. Okay, for AA is a non-calculator paper for paper 1. But importantly, everyone goes through the internal assessment, which has a weightage of 20%. Okay, it is marked out of 20 marks. And it is assessed over 5 key components: presentation, criterion A. Criterion B is mathematical communication. Criterion C is personal engagement. I'll be talking about these quite in detail. Criterion D is reflection, how well you think through your IA. And the last criteria is actually your use of mathematics and also the difficulty level of your mathematics. As I mentioned earlier, it is marked fully by the teacher, graded by the teacher, but IBO can come in to audit the IAs and even moderate the marks of the entire school. Okay, I'll start with the first component, presentation. Presentation out of 20 marks is worth 4 marks. To achieve the full 4 marks, it is possible. Okay, your IA must be, in 3 words, coherent, well-organized, and concise. Okay, so actually how teachers mark this is they look through these three criteria. Okay, a coherent explanation requires an aim, okay, and in your report, logically developed IA that is easy to follow based on IB standards. Okay, so you must have an overall structure, your introduction, your body, your conclusion, okay, and you must make sure that they link to each other. I'll show you some examples later. Okay, a well-organized exploration, okay, you need to include an introduction, describe the aim of the exploration, and include a conclusion. All relevant graphs, tables, and diagrams should be inside, properly labeled, well-organized. Okay, you can even use an appendix to include information on large data sets. The IA has to be very concise, right? So a concise exploration does not show irrelevant, unnecessary information. Okay, sometimes a common mistake is my students tend to repeat the investigation on another data set, and some teachers may call this repetitive. Okay, you can use your GDC, you can use technology, but it is not required. They're more interested in you using analytical approaches, okay, rather than technological ones, but you can use your GDC. Okay, and this will not be penalized. Number 2, mathematical communication. This is also worth quite a hefty 4 marks. Okay, for mathematical communication, you should be aiming to score about 3 or 4 marks. All your notation, your symbols, your terminology must be consistent. Okay, you can use multiple forms of math representation. So my students use formula, diagrams, tables, charts, figures, graphs, and models in their IA. Okay. And it is preferred if you use a deductive method to set out your proofs logically where appropriate. Personal engagement is worth a little less. It is quite easy to score for this one if you manage to show personal engagement throughout your report. They're looking for 2 keywords here. The first one is significant personal engagement. You must be able to demonstrate authentic personal engagement. I will show you guys some ideas later. Okay, so think about where you come from, what are your interests, your passions. If you go from there, that is possibly a very good start. Okay, if you want to strive for outstanding personal engagement, not only must you have an authentic personal engagement in numerous instances, okay, but it must also drive the exploration forward in a creative way. Okay, after reading the IA, you must leave the impression that the student has really developed their approach, understanding, and apply it to the IA. Okay, so that is personal engagement. Critical reflection is worth 3 marks. Okay, to score the highest marks, your reflection is assessed throughout the report. Okay, it must be crucial, it must be deciding, you must make key conclusions, okay, and it must be very insightful. It will often develop through your mathematical results, okay, and how you actually discuss and reflect on your key results. Yeah. If you're striving for substantial evidence, okay, then the critical reflection is seen throughout the report. It is not just in one section. Some of my students, they just have one subsection on reflection, okay, but that is possible, but how reflection is assessed is throughout the entire report. And component E differs for SL and HL, okay? So for standard level, it is also the highest weightage is 6 marks. So the component E has the highest weightage of 6 marks out of 20. For SL students, you expect the IA to be relevant. Okay, relevant refers to the mathematics that supports the development of the exploration towards its aims. Okay, the use of math, the difficulty of the math, should be commensurate or equal to the level of the course. Okay, you shouldn't be using math that's only in the prior learning topics or topics that you learn in GCSE or your middle school math. Yeah, so it should be slightly more difficult. Okay, and you must demonstrate the use of this math. Okay, knowledge must be thorough. For knowledge and understanding to be thorough, it must be demonstrated throughout the report. Yeah, and a clear understanding must be shown. Okay, I won't go through in detail, but the idea is that you will have to ensure that your difficulty of math is appropriate. For HL, there's 2 additional requirements if you see over here. So for those taking HL, there is a requirement for sophistication for the math used and rigor. So rigor involves the clarity of logic and language. Feel free to screenshot my slides if you want to read later. Yeah. And you must have very strong mathematical claims relevant to the development of the exploration. Okay, so these are the 5 components of the assessment rubric. So this is an important slide here. It's something that I've been guiding my 800 students in IB and how I've been guiding them in this way, how to actually do the approach the IA. I always start with the brainstorming session, and it usually takes about 1-2 hours. We do mind maps. Okay, we dig into the students' passions, interests. Sometimes students will tell me they have no passion, no interest. So we look at things from the perspective of current affairs or real world situations. I'll show you guys some examples later. Okay, so you can come from the angle of personal interest, passion. If you can't think of any, right, you can also look at what is happening now in today's world, things like cryptocurrency, global warming. These are real world situations that are engaging and relevant. Okay, after choosing some potential topics, you must go into some research. Okay, go into maybe select 3 to 5 potential topics. It could be personal interest, current affairs, or real world issues, and see what people have done in literature for these topics. Okay, and see how you can use it and apply it to your IA. Okay, so the internal assessment is unique to yourself. Okay, although we are doing research on what is currently being done. Okay, take note, you don't just copy wholesale, you don't plagiarize or collude with another friend of yours or duplicate any work. So it's quite obvious. I think plagiarism checks are readily available. It is very easy to detect whether you ripped off a chunk of mathematical equations and put them in your IA. Yeah, so please don't do that. Okay. After doing some research, usually about 1 or 2 months later, some schools will ask you to submit a proposal. Okay. From there, you can select 1 or 2 topics after your research that you think has the highest potential, and then you further develop this. Okay. How I always like to begin with the end in mind, right? So you brainstorm for an idea, you look in the possible math, whether it's relevant, is it equivalent to the IB standards or slightly higher. Okay. If there's any potential topics, you take it and then you draft an early draft with the skeleton, okay, the titles, introduction, the body, and you see whether this could potentially be a complete IA even before you do it. Okay, this actually helps because a lot of my students, they jump into a topic, they go into the math, and then 6 months later, they realize it's too difficult or it's too easy, right? They want to change it, or they find they want to do something else. Okay, so it's very important that you select and you try and do a draft, a skeleton of your entire IA, so that you don't have to panic and switch topic or something like that a year later, which I've seen students do at the last minute. Okay, in terms of the structure, I find this to be very useful, and a lot of my students have scored above 16, 17, 18 for their IAs using this format. It may not be a one-off solution, it may not be the best, but it guides their thinking. Okay, so this is the rough scope. I always start with an introduction. The introduction comprises of the rationale, aim, and objectives. If you put these 2 in, you're going to get the marks for personal engagement already. Be very specific with your aim and objectives, and what research question are you answering. Okay, if you have that, the next thing to talk about will be the background. Okay, you don't have to put it as separate subtitles. Okay, it can still be under one introduction, but a teacher will be able to sieve this out. Okay, but for how I teach my students, I like to insert a background, which is the research data, what are the reliable information, the story, okay, and what are the data used that are reliable, okay, not from Wikipedia and all that, and the plan of action. What are you going to do for this IA? In the method section, we discuss what are the mathematics that we use. It could be modeling, application, calculus, for example. Perhaps you need some derivations to proceed, right? Any kind of math theory that you employ. For example, fundamental theorem of calculus. If you're doing HLAA, you may want to put in a Maclaurin series, right? So whatever math you're using for the report, put it in this section. The next section is important because investigation is your actual personal work, okay? Apply the math that you know, okay, to the data that you researched on to get your own unique results. Okay, this part of the IA is usually not found on the internet because it is your own work, your own unique set of investigations. Okay, investigations usually lead to some key results, of which we will discuss. Okay, so there's a discussion section to discuss your findings, compare and contrast your results, discuss the accuracy of your method, advantages and limitations. For example, the difference between using a Taylor series compared to finding the area of area under graph, for example, right? And how well are you answering your RQ after doing the investigation, right? Reflection, I put it over here, but it is to be seen throughout the entire report. Provide key insights to the method, investigation, and the discussion sections. Okay, and we end off with a conclusion, which shouldn't be too lengthy, okay, but you can share your distilled conclusions and results. Summarize your key findings in this maybe half a page or 1 page conclusion. Another thing I find useful, which is not mentioned, is to discuss the possible extensions. So for a reader who has read your IA, how can your work be carried forward or extended or further investigated? Okay, what math can be used? What didn't you do that can be done, right? That can further improve the results or gather more data, yeah, that sort of thing. And lastly, the reference and the appendix, okay? You can't really see it here, but make sure that your reference is in line with your school's reference style, okay? I know different schools use different styles, for example, MLA, APA, different approaches. There's no right or wrong, okay, but check with your school on what is their required reference style. Okay, this is quite interesting. So last night I came up with some, don't take this wholesale, but I just came up with some possible topics that I just came off the cuff. I just thought off the cuff, hopefully to spark your mind, trigger your mind into how to think of an RQ. We always pair it with the data and the math involved. Okay, for example, perhaps you are involved in the United Nations conference in international school, and you're interested in global warming, right? One thing you can do is to use statistics, regression, and causality. Okay, and I'm based in Singapore. Okay, it's about 11:30 p.m. here. I thought of a RQ, which is, will Singapore achieve its Paris Agreement targets by 2030 and 2050? So whether you're doing AA or AI, you will be learning this topic, right? And it's about forecasting. So a lot of economists, analysts, they use statistics to predict whether, you know, a certain company will hit its targets or will a country meet its greenhouse gas emission targets. This has been known to score quite well also, okay? If you're, for example, if you're passionate in music, right, you could investigate whether there's a pattern in major chords. So for example, your C major, D major, A, B, C, D, E, F, do they follow a sort of mathematical pattern? You can investigate that. Is there a correlation between the peak of a song and the golden ratio? There could be. So for example, if you listen to pop music or classical music, right, or EDM, yeah, your DJ music, do all these songs have a pattern to it? Do they follow the golden ratio, for example? Okay, this is more of the second one is more recommended for SL, yeah, because the difficulty of math is about there. Okay, if you're interested in physics, motion of a pendulum, you can investigate whether the Maclaurin series and Taylor series is a good approximation to the simple harmonic motion, for example. So there's more science physics. If you are interested in economics, right, there's a lot of correlation involved. For example, does population influence the GDP of a country? Right, you might do it for your own country, wherever you are at. Correlation always talks about the past, okay? We want to see whether two factors are strongly correlated, weakly correlated, okay? This is in the IB topics as well. Or are they negatively correlated? This is quite interesting. You can also investigate other parameters, like instead of population and GDP, some of my students have done like infant mortality, or is there an effect, right? So any two factors with good data sets, you can actually do an investigation. You can even go into the statistical analysis, things like mean, variance, covariance, ANOVA, analysis of variance, even normal distributions. So it may look simple here, but it can really extend to something quite niche. Yeah. For those taking AI, right, you'll be studying, which is a new subject. There's a new topic called graph theory, which came out, which started from the May 2021 exams. If you like traveling, right, you can investigate the traveling salesman problem. Some of you might be aware of that. And also the Hamiltonian path, okay. One of the interesting one, so I support Chelsea, okay, but I always wondered what is the shortest distance that Chelsea can travel by bus to complete its EPL tour in the UK, right? So that is quite interesting also. If you're interested in sports, you could even do ranking and statistics, right? What makes a sport competitive, right? You can compare two sports. Is basketball or rugby more competitive? If you think about it, competitiveness is basically a measure of how often the rankings change, right, between teams. The more the ranking changes, right, the more competitive it is. Okay, so that's something to look into also. There was an interesting topic that I thought about, whether there was an influence of money in football, right? For example, the top club now, I think, is Arsenal, right? So does money spent by a football club buying its players affect its performance and ranking? Right? There's also correlation. If you're interested in geometry and 3D solids, a lot of fundamental, this is a very popular topic for my students, because especially for the AA students, okay, the analysis and approaches students, because it's a lot of calculus. There's a lot of fundamental theorem, integration, even differential equations. I've always wanted to calculate the volume of my Changi Airport in Singapore, okay, which is actually the shape of an ellipsoid. This requires things like double integral, triple integral, area under graph, okay, that kind of interesting stuff. A lot of calculus involved here. The minute you go into non-uniform 3D solids, okay, things get a bit more complicated. Calculating the volume and surface area of a donut, right, that could be possible. What is the volume of a Pringle, right, which is also a parabolic hyperboloid. I think a few years back, my student did investigation on monuments, yeah, statues, monuments, things like the Chicago Bean. Very interesting stuff to investigate. If you're interested in chemistry, right, or material science, you can go into nanoparticles. Surface area to volume, surface to volume ratio is also a big topic, very popular. Calculating the surface area to volume ratio of COVID molecules or filters in chemistry, cancer cells. These are very interesting if you take biology, chemistry, right? Because the infection rate, I'm sure, is affected by the shape of the cell, right? And the geometrical properties of the molecules, for example. If you're interested in geography, right, you can look at differential equations and slope fields. I thought of this last night. What are the mathematical equations that describe Mount Everest? Right, differential equations and slope fields is a new topic in AA and also AI. Right, very interesting stuff that you can look into. This example of some IAs that I managed to find, and some are from my own students. So Joseph Schooling is a Singaporean. This was a report done by one of my students actually. Very clear aim and rationale, okay, clear sound methodology. So this is how the teacher marks your IA: clear aim and rationale, clear and sound methods. Okay, demonstrate personal engagement in this topic. This is very interesting because this student actually tried to predict whether Joseph Schooling will win the 100 meters butterfly in 2016. Yeah. He ended off with, I just took snapshots of his her IA. You can see over here, right? He tried to do a regression to predict the performance in Joseph Schooling's time, and you can see that it's getting better and better. Okay, and he compared it with Leclos and Phelps, Michael Phelps' time. Okay, so this is quite interesting. Very clear correlation and regression graphs here. This was using technology. Okay, but he really discussed and reflected on the results. The Knight's Tour. So this was an IA done to find the shortest path that a knight can take from a chessboard, Hamiltonian path. Okay, so he did it for different sizes of chessboards: 4x4, 5x5, 8x8. Okay, so this is I would say more relevant for maybe AI students. A bit of graph theory, shortest distance. Yeah. Elliptic curve. This was one that involved Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, Satoshi's Bitcoin, actually employs the use of something called ECC, elliptic curve cryptography. So all your cryptocurrencies actually run on this equation. Okay, and he tried to manually solve backwards, and there were some challenges. Yeah, so be careful when trying to do very challenging mathematics. You might come to a roadblock, and you must find a way to maybe make it a bit easier or take an alternate path. Right? It is basically almost impossible to solve the natural log problem, which is the solution to elliptic curves. Okay, but it was a good discussion in the report. This was done also by my student, graph theory. This was his interest was in the Spanish flu, and he takes biology, right? He wanted to optimize the shortest routes in Massachusetts, USA, back in the 1918s, where he tried to understand the paths that medical transport or ambulances can take to pick up passengers all over Massachusetts. Now, this was quite interesting. Very heavily involved with graph theory, Hamiltonian path, Prim's algorithm, harmonic centrality. Yeah. He also went on to do a Voronoi diagram, which is a new topic in AI, but he is an AA student. Yeah, so this was quite interesting. So Voronoi diagrams is a new topic in AI. Yeah, that's all. These are some of the samples. I'll go through some of the frequently asked questions, but feel free to ask any other questions that you have. Okay, I'll just run through them very briefly. Mathematical exploration and EE, extended essay, very different. Okay, EE is going to be much more intensive. Okay, longer pages, longer word count, much more conceptual, theoretical. Okay, basically more workload there. Okay, how long should IA be? It's about 12 to 20 pages. Okay, the guide stays between 6 to 12 pages. Okay, I have students that go up to 20 pages, including the bibliography. Okay, just take note that you want to be more concise. Okay, that will really help. How long should it take? The guideline is about 10 to 14 hours, but I think most of my students take more than that. Okay, I think that is just a guide. I think many students actually spend a lot more time on this. Yeah. Does the exploration need a title? Yes, as mentioned earlier. This was a common question. Can students in the same schools use the same title? Yes, but the explorations must be different. Okay, very rarely will they use the same title anyway. Okay, but make sure your explorations are not the same. Yeah. The same stimulus. So stimulus is where the teacher actually brings everyone for a class and then shares some common topics, to sort of stimulate students to think of their own RQ and IAs. Okay. Yeah, so schools can actually use the same stimulus for all the students, but usually what happens is every student will start to find their own path, find their own topics. Yeah, SL students can use the same stimulus. Okay. This is quite rare, but a student can actually do more than one exploration, and it is up to the school to decide. But usually, it's most of the time the student just does one exploration. Yeah. Interesting question. Should the scope and sequence of the SLHL course influence the exploration? Ideally, it should not be. Okay, you should stem it from passion, interest, current affairs. Okay, but it will be good to ensure that your math difficulty is not too crazy and not too easy. Okay, so the SLHL standard that you're learning now is a good guide. How much help can a teacher give? My students always ask me, right? How much should my school teacher be helping me? The teacher is there to guide, okay, to advise you, okay, but he or she will never micromanage you. At the end of the day, you have to own the IA, okay, and even sometimes explain to the teacher your methods and how you go about doing your IA. Okay, the IA is usually starts at the end of the first year. Okay, but I've seen some schools start a bit earlier, and some schools also early in the second year. But a good time to think of your IA is probably middle of first year. Start thinking about it. So you plan early. This is an interesting question, right? Because some of my students, they do IAs that are so complicated that their friend doesn't understand. Okay, so this is actually from IBO. You will want the exploration to be understandable and readable by your own peers. Okay, don't make it such a crazy, difficult IA that no one understands. Can the students use mathematics other than that in class? Yes. Okay, but the harder your math, the better you should explain it. Okay, that's very important. So you can use math outside of the syllabus. Okay. Important question, the difference between communication and criterion. Communication and mathematical presentation. This is very different. So communication, in good English helps. Organization, coherence. Okay, that's where language comes in. Okay. But mathematical presentation is different. It's about your figures, how well you label your equations, your tables, graphs, okay, and all the figures, charts, tables, graphs. So very different. Can a student submit one of the old portfolios? So some schools actually ask for initial proposal, like 1 or 2, before the student actually embarks on the IA. So from what I understand is, yes, you can actually use it, okay? It is unsuitable to be submitted as full explorations because it is not developed enough. Okay, but a lot of schools, they start by giving their students easy proposal forms for them to fill in to guide them towards the RQ. But you can use the same topic, it's fine. This was in the past, right? Some actually submitted handwritten IAs, but I think now mostly word processed, okay? Personal engagement is a big thing. Okay, how do we have more personal engagement? Okay, so the exploration is intended to be an opportunity for students to use mathematics to develop an area of interest, yeah? Not to solve someone else's problem or to rip someone else's work and put it in there. Okay, so teachers will be able to see out whether you have strong personal engagement. Okay, it is very easy to see whether your work is already being done by others, okay, on the internet now. Okay, so I think you understand what I'm saying. Okay, criterion E, use of mathematics, precise and correct mathematics. So precise mathematics, accuracy, your significant figures, keep it consistent. Okay, for example, a good guide I like to use is 3 significant figures for most numbers and 5 significant figures for statistics and 1 decimal place for angles. The important thing is to keep it consistent. Okay, I have students that send 3 significant figures for some parts of the IA and then 9 significant figures for the next part of the IA. So that doesn't make sense. Yeah. So that's being precise. Yeah. Correct mathematics. Okay. Make sure that your equations follow through, understandable from step to step. Oh, one tip that I always tell my students is don't flood the page with just equations. Teachers love to see explanations followed by equation, maybe a short explanation followed by equation, that kind of thing. Don't just chunk 10 equations there without any word explanations. Okay, and the last one is complete exploration. All steps must be clearly explained. Okay, but don't be too you gotta be concise, don't be too long-winded. Okay, a first draft is the only time that a student can hand in and the teacher will give feedback. Yeah. After that, it will be the final submission. So take note. So it'll be good. Another tip that I have is always do your best for the first draft. So give your teacher a very good impression. Okay, because the first draft marks is going to be very important in determining your final draft marks. right? If you give your teacher a good impression on the first draft, there's a chance of you to score higher. You can ask your teacher, how can I improve, right? How can I get higher marks? How can I score better? But if you start off on a weak first draft, it's just very hard to jump a bit higher. Yeah. Okay, citation, like I mentioned, check with the school, what is the proper referencing style. Yeah. You don't need a bibliography at the end, but if you have chunky data sets, like swimming timings, or you have football league year-on-year data that you don't want to put in your IA, then you can put it in the bibliography or appendix. Yeah, so those are some of the questions that my students usually ask year on year. Feel free to ask me any questions if you have. Yeah, thank you very much. I hope this has been useful. Show if you have anything you want to say, you can also chime in.
Okay, does anyone has any questions specific to your own IA? I think that's perfectly fine if you want to ask. Okay, I think we have a question, Boon. You can check out your, Dr. Boon, you can check out your Q&A.
Yeah, so
okay.
Hi. Okay, thanks for the question. Where to find the newsletter for more IA seminars?
Okay, I see. All right. So I think you're asking about the subsequent seminars you'll be conducting. So I have received your email address for participating in this. So I'll actually will be adding you to our mailing list, which means that you actually will be receiving the news updates as and when we're going to conduct more of these IAs. Yeah. Does anyone else has anything regarding your IAs? I think that if you have some sample IA, topic that you want to ask Dr. Boon, I think feel free to ask him in this session as well.
Yeah, feel free to ask if you have it doesn't end here. Okay, if you think that you have questions in future, you can always drop us an email. Happy to answer.
Okay, Dr. Boon, I think that's another question.
Yeah. Do review a mark?
Revive.
Oh, yes. Do we receive a mark? I think that's your question. Yes. You will receive a mark. Yeah. Not only a mark, but okay, good schools with good teachers will even give you the breakdown of the marks. But you can definitely ask this from your teacher. You will receive not only the marks, but the breakdown for each component. Yeah.
Well, since we are on this so far, I would like to ask everyone, if there's anything regarding the IB which you think you need help with, why not just drop me a message inside this chat so that I can actually get our team to go and work on it. So right now, I'm telling you that we have TOK, Chem, and Physics in place. If there's anything regarding the IB, we have a huge team back in Singapore. I mean, they can definitely support you in this area.
Okay, I have two more questions. The first, can we send the email link of the recording and the?
Yes, we will be able to do it.
Okay, yeah. So on Andrea, we will be. Yes. Isvan has a very interesting question. Do you have any suggestions for middle year program 5? If I take HL Math AA, should I start to work on my IA during summer? That is very early, but what I will say, right, Isvan, is it's a bit too early, but you can definitely look into your passions and interests. If you really want to start ahead of the curve, yeah, if you really want to start ahead of the curve, definitely you can look into IAs. And if you are taking HL Math AA, it is highly recommended that you can look into topics that are related to calculus, differentiation, integration, maximum minimum points, area under curve, volume of revolution, differential equations. These are the things that excite AA teachers. Yeah. Hope that answers your question. Yeah. I have another question. I'm almost at the end of my first year and we have barely covered anything regarding the Math IA. Should I be worried? That is interesting. Okay, so officially on the IB website, teachers must start the IA at the end of the first year latest. So I think you should expect it soon. Okay. Please ask your teacher if you have not started. If you're at the end of your first year, April, I believe soon your teacher will be asking you to start your IA. Yeah, I know. I'm not sure which schools you guys come from, but it'd be good to prompt your teacher. Yeah, you shouldn't be worried, but you should be planning for your IA because it's going to come anyway. So the thing about IB, right? All my students suffer the same problem, which is etokia, EETOKIA, cramping last minute, right? So if you don't want them all to come at once in the first half of your second year, you can start planning and even start doing your IA. I have students that start their IA 1 month, 2 months after when the IB starts. Huh? Okay. Good question. What subjects excite math AI teachers? So applications and interpretation is a new topic, right? A lot of teachers have to learn new topics, graph theory. Okay, but let me go through some potential topics that will excite AI teachers. Graph theory, traveling salesman problem, Chinese postman problem, shortest path, right? I had a student that scored very well for AI IAs, and she did the COVID in China because there was a lockdown, so all the all the police officers had to go to different condominiums to take COVID tests for the residents. And what she did was calculate the shortest distance that the policemen will take. And she did about 17, 18 upon 20. Okay, so graph theory, Hamiltonian path. You can also look at Voronoi diagrams, a new topic in AI, which relates to shortest distance in regions, okay, like the math IA that I showed you just now. You can also look at matrices, matrix transformation, which is also a new topic. Yeah. What fundamentally excites AI teachers will be topics that are in the AI syllabus, but slightly more difficult. Yeah, so these are the very new ones: graph theory, ordinary differential equations. And one more, coupled ordinary differential equations, the last topic of the syllabus. You definitely have to look into that. No one has, I don't know any student has actually done that yet. So the very new topics that are actually university engineering math first year brought forward to IBAI. Okay, next question. What are some good areas to start if not too many HR topics are covered? I understand this question. Okay, so actually, every school has different sequences of topics, and most of the time, when you have to start your IA, you have not done certain topics, right? I will say this: if you're going to do a topic that has been covered in school already, then yes, it might be easier for you. But I have students that also took on the challenge and did an IA on topics that they are only going to learn later on. For example, calculus, statistics, normal distribution, vectors in HR is the last part also. Okay, so different schools have different topics, sequence. Okay, but if you do an IA topic that you have not learned, that is fine also, because it will help you when you actually get to that topic in school. Yeah. But if you are weak in math, and you are able to catch up with only what is being taught in school, then perhaps you may want to stick to topics that have already been covered. For example, sequence series, binomial theorem, Maclaurin series, functions, graphs, complex numbers 1 maybe. Yeah. Oh yeah, and then you have a math AAHL. Yeah, they're exactly math AAHL. These are the topics. Yeah. But of course, I encourage you to take on the challenge and do some calculus questions, because you're going to be learning a lot of that in the second year. Yeah.
Okay, I understand that, I asked in the chat if you guys have any particular subjects or area within IB that you would like us to cover as seminars. And I received someone telling us that it's not possible to suggest topics. So I think perhaps there could be some issue with the chat settings. So you can actually type it as a Q&A, and then, over here, we'll just also share with everyone what someone else has suggested for us to cover in one of our upcoming seminars. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, just a very quick recap. TOK will be the next weekend, followed by econs, physics, and chemistry and physics. Yeah.
Yep, feel free to ask any questions. Otherwise, it doesn't end here. If you have questions in the future, you can always drop us an email. Happy to help.
Yeah, I think even if it's questions that's not related to math, we will definitely try our best to help you, since, I mean, we have a huge team here and we have a lot of experience teaching IB across all subjects around the world anyway.
Interestingly, also, some of my students, some schools actually allow the referencing of ChatGPT Okay, so check with your school whether they allow that. I know in Singapore, all the local IB schools have allowed that already. So if you use ChatGPT as a source, reference ChatGPT. Not sure if it's happening outside of Singapore, but I think it's quite progressive.
Okay, so I received two suggestions, Lang and Lit IO and biology IA. Okay, sure. We will have that in the pipeline as well, and it will likely be happening maybe geography, bio. Okay, so I think when it comes to EE, we are very particular about whether or not to conduct an EE seminar because it's very centered around a topic you choose, and in order for us to really provide value, it really depends on what topic that we want to go into. So I think right now, at least for IA, it covers general. It is more generic in the area, but we can definitely look at EE as well. Okay, so I do see geography and bio. So I bio, Langley, IO, and geography. Thank you for those inputs. Keep them coming in.
Yep. Any final questions? Feel free to ask. Even if it's exam related, non-IA related, math related, you can ask me anything.
Yeah. So we hope that most of you here, or rather all of you here, are actually edXP users. So you guys have actually tried out our platform. So if you are edXP users, you have any questions regarding edXP as well, or any suggestions for us, we are more than happy to actually receive them.
I think that's about it. Sure.
Yep, I think so. Okay, yeah, so I think we will probably be around for the next 5 minutes just in case anyone else has any further questions. If not, I think feel free to make your leave and look out for our upcoming emails, and we'll provide you with the details regarding the upcoming seminars.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We'll still be around for the next 5 minutes if anyone has any last-minute questions for us. Okay, Boon, we have a question, Dr. Boon.
How should ChatGPT be treated as a source? This is a very new thing. So my latest batch of students, what they did was they actually screenshotted their question that they asked on ChatGPT and the answers as well. They put it in, some of them put it in the bibliography, right? And some of them didn't. They just put it as a reference on the reference page. Yeah. But the style of reference is dependent on the school, right? So if it's APA or MLA, you can follow the titles. I mean the sections needed for the reference. Yeah. But definitely cite it properly if you use it. Yeah. It's a very interesting one. ChatGPT is something new, but a lot of students started using it this year. Right? All my students actually used it. Right. So I encourage them to reference it in their report at the end, reference. And if it's very lengthy, they can also attach screenshots of key components in the bibliography section. Definitely don't put it in the main report. Yeah. Okay, another question. This is about math, AAHL, extended essay. Any suggestions about choosing our tuition question? Yeah. Okay, so this is about EE, yeah? So math EE, Aditya. You can either, there's only two ways about it. You either go historical, you can look at the IB rubric, the extended essay for math rubrics. You either take a historical approach or you take a conceptual theoretical approach. There's only two ways that they mentioned in the IBO rubrics for math EE. I have a student that recently did the history of complex numbers. okay, where he actually monitored and tried to explain how, math evolved from algebra, solving of simple quadratic equations, and then using geometry, and then how we had to use complex numbers I to solve cubic equations, decompress cubic equations. So a lot of history. Yeah. So I would say two ways: history or very, very abstract conceptual. Aditya, is there a certain topic that you're interested in? Maybe complex numbers or even calculus? Probability. So probability, I would probability can be quite easy, right? And if you're doing math AAHL, you're gonna have to make it very, very interesting and probably quite difficult as well. The math difficulty has to be more. Yeah, so if you talk about probability, maybe game theory, right? You saw my Knight's Tour example, but probably something more difficult. You can look into Bayes' theorem, right? It has to be an extension of what you are learning now, right? So you can't do things like mutually exclusive events, independent events. It has to be definitely more than that. Yeah, you can probably look at game theory, something more difficult, right? Yeah, but I would recommend for AAHL, you look into things like something more difficult, like complex numbers, calculus, differentiation, integration, limits. Yeah, maybe not something that you like from what I can tell, but it will help for AAHL. Probability can, but you probably need to make it more engaging. You need to find a way. Thank you.
Dr. Boon, I think there's another question.
No.
About the topic.
Oh,
yeah.
Any suggestions on how to find a topic that could have personal connection? Math AI. Yeah, so when it comes to personal engagement, you need to ask, okay, so how I do it? I go through like a 1 hour research with my student to mind map it on the whiteboard. So you can do the same on a piece of paper, put yourself in the middle, start to extend your story. You can first put the HL topics that you do. For example, if you take chemistry and physics, you can put it there. What CCAs are you involved in? Sports, clubs and societies, are you in a debate? Right, start to map it out. Then that's where your personal connection will show. Yeah, from there you can either look at your HL, SL subjects that you've taken, or your passions and interests, right? Any awards that you win, are you in like MUM, right? Or tennis, that you will be surprised to find that there's math in many things. Yeah. Or if you like design and you like designs or arts, you can go into design of buildings, finding the volume of 3D buildings, that kind of stuff. Yeah. You can always branch it out, but start from yourself. And what are your passions, interests? You can draw a little mind map for yourself. That really helps. A lot of my students start from there. I hope that answers your question.
Yep, I think if you guys do not have any more questions, I think you guys can feel free to leave the chat, to leave the seminar, and just do know that at the same time, next week at the same day, we will have our TOK seminar, and more details will definitely be sent to you via email. Okay, if not, okay, I think we'll wrap things up, and thank you everyone. We will see you guys next week again, okay, for our TOK seminar.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.